Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Tuesday, October the 10th, 2023. Today I want to continue with what I was talking about yesterday. In other words, I want to carry on talking about Israel. Yesterday I looked at the chart of the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, but I kind of felt that I didn't really look at his horoscope in sufficient detail. There are certainly quite a lot of things I missed, and I didn't actually compare his chart with that of Israel. The question is this man good for Israel? Some would say that he's not. So that is one horoscope I want to look at. I also want to look at the chart of the Israeli intelligence agency, Mossad. There is I'm sure, well, not just a view, I think there's an opinion in Israel that Mossad messed up. I mean, how could they have missed this massive incursion by Palestine from Gaza? So, that's a chart I want to look at. Of course, I don't know the ins and outs of Israeli intelligence. I'm not an expert on Israel. I'm sure I've made some massive generalizations by just saying, "Oh, it's all Mossad." We all know Mossad, but I'm sure it's far more complicated than that. So that's a chart I want to look at. I also want to compare the horoscopes of Israel and Palestine, because there's some interesting stuff going on there. Very, very simple astrology, but I feel I really should have covered that. But before I do all that, I want to look at the astrology for today, which is Tuesday, October the 10th, 2023. So let's look at today's astrology. So this is the positions of the planets on October the 10th, 2023 at noon, set for New York. Yesterday on Monday I said that the position of the planets wasn't great, and today I'd say the same thing. I don't think it's going to be a great day. Okay, maybe on a personal level it'll be okay, but globally it's still looking really tense. That's obvious. You don't need to be an astrologer to say that. But what I'm saying is that what's going on in the world is certainly reflected in the astrology. So what is going on? Well, the moon goes into Virgo today. The moon actually, it goes into Virgo London time at 1:02 p.m., which is sort of lunchtime. That would be 2:02 p.m. If you're in Western Europe. If you're in Australia, New Zealand, whatever, moon goes into Virgo late evening, so it's not really such an issue. If you're in America, well, New York time, moon goes into Virgo 7:02 a.m., so pretty much a whole day. And if you're in Los Angeles, Seattle, Portland, Oregon, it would go in at 4:02 a.m. So yeah, in the Americas, moon in Virgo all day. Western Europe, it's more of a sort of afternoon thing. So on the face of it, moon going into Virgo should be a good thing, because it straight away makes a conjunction with Venus. But it's a moon conjunct Venus in Virgo. It's not so happy and warm and fuzzy in Virgo as it might be, say, in Pisces or Cancer. Virgo, as I said yesterday, is very focused on details. Relationships are all about details. Money is all about details. You've got to get everything right, and appearances can be very important. And money can be very important. I suppose the Virgo idea is there's no such thing as a free lunch. Everything has a price. And this as soon as the moon moves into Virgo, it straight away makes an opposition aspect to Saturn. And of course, Venus is making an opposition aspect to Saturn. So what appears to be great in terms of relationships is actually not so good. In certain situations, perhaps even terrible. Relationships are not going to work well today, I think. I think one-to-one contacts, particularly where you've got emotional expectations, should probably be avoided. Because it's just not going to work out, and you may get caught on details. This can happen so easily. And this is particularly the case if it's a new relationship, or a relationship that has recently been through stormy seas. You probably want to steer clear of it. It's just not going to work, because people are going to so focused on things that are non-emotional. The details, the money, the mistakes, the issues relating to appearance. Okay. The only situation where relationship might function is if they're very focused on a particular thing. If it's really problem solving, I don't know, if you and your partner want to have a serious discussion about plumbing systems, for example, or if you want to have a serious discussion about money, this might be the time to get all the details out of the way. But okay, even then, it's going to be pretty tense. So, as far as relationships, I'm not particularly impressed with the day's prospects. Also, like yesterday, Mars and Saturn, and Venus and Mars, those two midpoints are on the Aries point. Aries is now, exactly on the Mars-Saturn midpoint. We know there's going to be more death because we know what's going on in Gaza. We know what's happening in Israel. We know what's happening. Again, it's obvious. But so the best I can say is, Aries is on the Mars-Saturn midpoint. It is about some collective connection with death. So that's what's going to be happening. Death is in the news, and so we know that already. But so all best I can say is what you're seeing in the news is reflected with the astrology, with the Aries on the Mars-Saturn midpoint. Aries also on the Venus-Mars midpoint. Supposedly a different energy. I mean, yesterday I talked about this sort of Wagnerian idea of Liebestod, death in love or whatever, that connection between death and love. And I suppose that what I said yesterday kind of holds for today as well. Though, there is in society around us sort of perhaps an obsession with sex, people being concerned about how people relate. We might see that, but I do think that the Aries on the Mars-Saturn midpoint is really going to dominate things. So that's the astrology for today. There may be other things. Well, I'm sure there's other things, but overall, not a good day. Just difficult, tense. But it's more likely to hit people, as I said yesterday, in war zones. It's a societal thing. Ordinary individuals doing ordinary things in ordinary places. It shouldn't be so bad. So let me now move on to my forecasts for the 12 signs. So hold on. So here are my forecasts for the 12 signs. Okay, so these are my forecasts for today, which is Monday, October the 10th, 2023. Aries. Everything needs to be in the right place, and whatever you're doing, the preparations have to be excellent. And it also feels that you may have to do something which is slightly out of character, which may feel an affront to your freedom of expression. You know, as an Aries, you're not really a details person, but today you do kind of have to focus on the details. Also, the things you eat need to be wholesome, and nothing should be consumed in excess, not least because your digestive system will be more sensitive than usual. Taurus, you have creative freedom, but only up to a point. You keep doing what you want, you keep creating new universes, then suddenly there's a brick wall. I suppose the restrictions are social. Other people will only go so far, and you have to know their limits. Or perhaps you just have to structure your creative impulse and make it applicable to the real world. Gemini, you feel very clear about what you want, and you're not in the mood for compromise. But if you run ahead of yourself, you might lose touch with your core foundations. It might therefore be a good idea to backtrack and put your ambitions on hold, just for long enough to reconnect with your home and family. Cancer, it's important that you get your facts right. There is a temptation to argue a point without thinking it through, and then all of a sudden you have to defend the indefensible. So if you insist on expressing your opinions, make sure that you have done your research. Yet, a conjunction between the Moon and Venus can be romantically useful. Leo, your financial situation is becoming clearer, and if you address yourself to things like spreadsheets and bank statements, you'll be able to see the underlying picture. There might be moments when the situation seems difficult, but knowledge is freedom, and it does seem that in one area of your life you can make some important savings. Virgo, there is a conjunction between the Moon and Venus in your star sign. You'll have a certain charm, and getting people onto your side shouldn't be a problem, in most cases. Yet there is someone difficult to deal with who seems to be holding you up. You want to get angry, but perhaps you're dealing with just a learning experience. Libra, something is bothering you and preventing you from making progress, and because you feel trapped, you might respond to the world in a negative, self-defeating way. But really, you're being told to get your act together. Your current strategy isn't perfect, and you need to make some changes, and you must be ready to accept criticism. Scorpio, your intuition is telling you that very soon there's going to be a big change, that your approach to the world will have to move 180 degrees. But you have to get your timing right, and right now there are limits to what you can do. From a social perspective, there's one friend you need to concentrate on, but even then there are limits. Sagittarius, today there's a conjunction between the Moon and Venus in Virgo. From a Sagittarian perspective, this is probably good news because it makes you look good and also propels you into the limelight. But not everyone is impressed. In fact, the more people know you, the less impressed they'll be. And your family could be downright rude. Capricorn, Capricorn, you're like a bucket of cold water. People have big ideas and they want to do wonderful things, but you know that it's just fantasy, and you're not afraid of bringing everyone down to earth with your matter-of-fact criticisms. And in relationships, you are hyper-realistic, at least for today, and you might not be much fun to be with. Aquarius, there's a fairly emotional atmosphere, but you wonder what the point of it all is. Emotions are not being helpful, and concerns about non-essential issues are wasting everyone's time. Or so it seems. You find the whole situation annoying, and you want to move things along. But in the process, you might not make yourself popular. Pisces, today you're very aware of your boundaries, and you don't want anyone encroaching on them. Yet there are people to deal with, and if you give anyone the cold shoulder, they might not forgive you, or you might lose an important opportunity. So be guarded, but also be aware of your responsibilities. So what I'm going to do now is I am going to switch to the I Ching. So as always, I threw 3 coins in the air and I asked the question, what is Tuesday going to be like for people watching this video? So the first hexagram I got is a hexagram that's kind of been coming up quite a lot recently, which is hexagram 10, treading. You know, this is when you're dealing with a tiger, the tiger's tail. In other words, you must not tread on the tiger's tail. Or at least you should avoid treading on the tiger's tail. So it's a situation where we do have to be careful, where we have to sort of tiptoe around a problem, but that doesn't mean to say that we should avoid it. And then I think in the first instance, when we deal with this, with whatever issue we have to deal with, we are going to be very careful. So, even if the tiger stirs, I think that our caution is going to be enough to take us through. And, we do have 2 moving lines, the 4th line moves and the 6th line moves. So this top line moves, and this top line moving is about dealing with a situation which has been really difficult, and really we've now come to the end of it. Maybe we won't be getting this hexagram again for some time. We've come to the end of the situation. So the question is, are we going to be successful or not? And whether or not we're going to be successful somewhat depends on our past performance, how we've handled it. So look back on how you've dealt with the matter. If you've dealt with it well, then it should be successful. If you've made a mess of it, if you've been careless, then okay, that maybe you can't expect great results. Now, one of the translations I was looking at, the Wynkoop translation, talked about return with this line. It's like we have gone out on we've kind of gone out on a limb to deal with an issue. We've done what we can. And the idea is that now we can perhaps return. We can go back. We can step back, if you like, from the tiger. We've done our job. Let's now see how it works. And then, because we've got 2 lines moving, we switch to another hexagram. And so the hexagram we move to is 60, limitation. So hexagram number 60 is limitation, and this is asking us to look at our life and see what we can do to get the thing in order. Look at the excesses in life where we're going too far. Perhaps we're spending too much time on leisure and pleasure. Perhaps we're spending too much money. Perhaps we've got unhealthy habits. Perhaps we're eating too much, drinking too much, watching too much TV. And we've just done our job with treading. And having done that, we need to, sort out our life in other ways. Now, limitation is not the same as, being super disciplined, being really tough on ourselves. No, the I Ching actually warns against this. I think the Wilhelm translation says something like, beware of galling limitation, limitation that hurts. Okay, I understand some limitation must hurt. So if you're giving up smoking in the short term, it's going to be painful, and that's the way it is. But, if you're insistent on working 14 hours a day or 16 hours a day, or if you're insistent on restricting yourself to 800 calories and it just really, really hurts, then no, that's not something you should be doing. It's limitation that feels natural, that is not actually painful. That's the kind of limitation that we should be trying to bring into our life. So that's the I Ching, and I now want to go back to the astrology. So I'm going to continue talking about Israel. So yesterday I talked about Benjamin Netanyahu's chart, and I felt that I didn't really look at his chart in sufficient detail. I didn't mention the fact that he was born, just before a new moon. So being born just before a new moon, the moon was waning when he was born, and so with that sun conjunct the moon, he's a super Libran. So you would think that someone who is a super Libran, who has 2 planets in Libra, would be reasonable. So how does that work? Well, when you're dealing with Libran politicians, you do have to think about balance. So when you think about balance, sort of classic Libran, there's poor Libra trying to adjust to the world, and it's really hard work, and one feels sorry for Libra trying to be so accommodating. But what if that balance works the other way? What if Libra has a particular view of the world and wants to impose that view of the world? Like Margaret Thatcher, she had her fundamental view of the world was the shopkeeper's daughter view of the world. The books should balance. You don't go into debt. That kind of sort of sensible austerity. You look after your family. Your family comes first, and she has that sort of image. She doesn't believe in society. That's Margaret Thatcher. That's her particular view of the world, and she attempts to impose that view of the world on the country she becomes prime minister of. And so, likewise with Benjamin Netanyahu, he has a view of the world. His view of the world may be very selfish. I understand there's been all sorts of issues with his business and financial dealings, and he wants to impose his needs, his security needs, what he wants onto the country that he becomes prime minister of. Okay, it's not how most Librans operate, but I think in this case that's how this Libran is working. Librans can be tough. I mean, Vladimir Putin is a Libran. Margaret Thatcher, as I've just said. Berlusconi in Italy, he was a Libran. So that may be part of the way. That Libra is working. We should also bear in mind that this Sun-Moon conjunction is square Jupiter, and as I said yesterday, Jupiter in Capricorn it's not nice, really. Jupiter is about expansion, our vision, but when it's in Capricorn, it's very much focused on ourselves and our selfish interests. And so you perhaps have to sort of bring that together with the new moon in Libra that Netanyahu was born under. It's very influenced by that Jupiter square. He is thinking about his selfish interests, his material interests, his financial interests. Obviously he doesn't want to get, I understand that there's been constant legal issues. He wants to sort all that out. And I think that is a suggestion about why he's been trying to mess with the Israeli legal system. And so, yeah, that's part of the way the Libra is working. Additionally, he has no traditional planets in water signs. So this, that can suggest that he's a little detached from the actual mood in the country he rules, in Israeli mood, the feelings in Israel. He might not always pick it up, especially as he's got this Venus square Saturn in his chart. That's really tough. Venus is supposed to be about warmth and emotion, and Saturn is smashing it there with that. So, with that lack of water and the Venus square Saturn, I think he does find it difficult to perhaps to relate to ordinary Israelis. Now, in the comments of yesterday's video, people mentioned the fact that there is an eclipse coming up pretty soon. And this eclipse, I should know where it is. This eclipse it's a new moon eclipse. Let me just check where it is. It's on October the 14th, and it's at 2108 Libra. So there's a new moon eclipse on his moon coming up. I should say one thing about this chart. I've set his chart for noon. I think most astrologers seem to take the view that he was born late morning, but we don't know that for sure. But the noon position of his moon is 20 degrees 18 Libra. And so he is going to have this new moon eclipse on his moon. So in a way, you might think, well, this is Netanyahu's new beginning, this Gaza attack, but the real action will be taking place for him, I think, after the new moon, which is in a few days' time. Although there is a view that astrological events can work before they happen. That sounds a bit strange, but the new moon maybe is working, although it's on the 14th of October, it may have actually kind of started a week earlier or 6 days earlier or whatever. So that's one possibility. Now, before I finish with Benjamin Netanyahu's chart, and there's still a lot more to say about Benjamin Netanyahu, but I can't go on forever. Before I finish with that, I just want to compare Benjamin Netanyahu's horoscope with that of Israel. How does he work for Israel? Israel is. So let's just we'll put Israel in the. Okay, so we've got Israel in the middle, and then we've got Benjamin Netanyahu on the outside. So there's Israel's chart. So what does Benjamin Netanyahu do for Israel? How does he help Israel? Okay, Israel has Libra rising, and so it's perhaps not surprising that Benjamin Netanyahu, with the sun in, you see, there's Israel's ascendant at 23 Libra, Netanyahu's moon at 20 Libra, and his sun at 27 Libra. So it's kind of not surprising with those planets on Israel's ascendant that Israel, is lumbered with him. There's a real point of attraction there. It was potentially easy for him to get into politics in that particular country. Now, Netanyahu's Mars is at 26 Leo, and Israel's Mars is at 28 Leo. So his Mars is picking up Israel's Mars. So I think if you've got Mars, that's a real battle. I mean, he is battling with his country. and I think that's been a focus of perhaps of his premiership, always fighting with his own country, but they still elect him. They can't, there's this compulsive. It's almost like there's a compulsive connection between Netanyahu's chart, perhaps through the ascendant and maybe the Mars as well, that just keeps these two things together. So maybe Netanyahu and Israel is like a dysfunctional marriage. That might be one way of looking at it. Another thing to point out is that Netanyahu's Uranus is conjunct Israel's Venus. Venus is might represent how the country feel. The country feeling Venus in Cancer. The country wants to feel comfortable, a good place to live in. People's perceptions about how they relate to themselves as a country. Maybe also something about the national finances, perhaps, Venus in Cancer. But his Uranus is conjunct Israel's Venus, so he just upends everything. He really is. He really is having something of a revolutionary impact on Israel's well-being and its sense of comfort. I'm not convinced that would be entirely helpful. I think that could be very destructive. I think his Jupiter in Capricorn is on Israel's IC. I don't know. I think there must be Jupiter is a fortunate planet, even though it's in Capricorn. So it may be that there are some people in Israel who feel that with Netanyahu, there's a certain sense of comfort, surprising as that might sound, about having Israel. That somehow Netanyahu is the only person that can guarantee the country's security. That may or may not be true, but that is simply a perception. So those are a few thoughts on Netanyahu. I would guess, looking at the connections between Netanyahu and Israel, that probably he's not someone you'd really want to have as prime minister. I think the connection between him and Israel may be somewhat unfortunate. So I now want to switch to the horoscope of Mossad. So Mossad was founded on December the 13th, 1949. And so it's Israel's intelligence agency. It is not surprising that Mossad is a Sagittarian organization, at least in terms of its reputation. I mean, the reputation of Mossad is this very, Moon in Virgo, Mars in Virgo, Saturn in Virgo, but the Sun in Sagittarius. Sun in Sagittarius, knowing no limits. Everyone sees Mossad as this organization that reaches out to all parts of the world to destroy its enemies. Whether it's going to sending a team to Argentina to kidnap the war criminal Eichmann, or sending people around Europe to assassinate the people involved with the Munich, 1972 Munich Olympics massacre. You can see it on YouTube, how they just went everywhere trying to kill these people. I think in one instance they actually killed the wrong person. But Sun in Sagittarius likes traveling, and certainly Mossad likes traveling. Look at that stuff in Virgo. Mars conjunct Saturn. 19 Mars at 19 Virgo, Saturn at 19 Virgo, Mars 24 Virgo, and then that Sun in Sagittarius is square the Mars-Saturn midpoint. That's certainly the reputation of Mossad's. It's just good at killing people. I'm not saying that's true, but I don't know a great deal about Mossad, but that's the view. And in Virgo, getting the details absolutely right, the details of killing. That's I do absolutely understand Mossad's, but killing people is a tiny part of what Mossad does. But I'm sorry if I'm looking at a stereotype of Mossad, but you can see that Sun in Sagittarius square the Mars Saturn and the Moon in Virgo. You can see how efficient it could be. So what about now? What happened? Why did Mossad not? And it's not. I understand it's not just Mossad, but what was going on? What was going on with this invasion? So let's just compare Mossad's chart with the chart of the attack. What I wanted to point out is the fact that Neptune is at 2548 Pisces, and I don't know the exact time of when Mossad was founded, whether it was at midnight, whether it was in the day. I suspect it was in the day. I think Ben Gurion made an order in 1949 that it be set up. So I'm guessing it was in the daytime. It wasn't just something that happened at midnight, or because it become as some kind of governmental or parliamentary act. I suspect it happened during the day, but we don't know when. I've just gone for noon. But Neptune is certainly opposition Mossad's Mars. Now, it's not that it was exactly opposition Mossad's Mars, but it seems that with Neptune opposition its Mars, it was there was confusion there. The Palestinians, Hamas was able to confuse Mossad, Neptune opposition Mars, and I think that's not just now, but just over the last, I don't know, few months, a year, and I think that that would indicate that Mossad is perhaps confused. It's got different priorities. Mars in Virgo can get overwhelmed with detail. And Neptune opposition Mars in Virgo, there's been all this detail coming in, and just Mossad has not been able to Mossad has not really been able to process it properly. So I think the Neptune square Mars does completely fit this, what happened with this incursion. They just didn't see it. Maybe they did see it, but they were focusing on something else, or perhaps they were being too clever by half. It's the Neptune that I found interesting, the Neptune transit that I found interesting. It may also be opposition the Moon, but we don't know what time Mossad was actually founded. I want to finish by looking at the charts of Palestine and Israel put together. So Israel was founded on May the 14th, 1948. Palestine, if we take the Algiers Declaration, I know there are other charts, but if we take the Algiers Declaration, it was founded on November the 15th. So that means, different years, but they were exactly 6 months apart. And this is reflected in their suns. You can see the sun of Israel has its... this is Palestine in the middle. So Palestine's sun is at 2250-something Scorpio. Israel's sun is at 2340 Taurus. So their suns are exactly opposition each other. And furthermore, Uranus right now is at around 23 Taurus. So Uranus is on approximately on Israel's sun, and it is approximately opposition Palestine's sun. So Uranus is triggering just aggravation between Israel and Palestine. Now, I understand I should have said this before it happened, but as I said yesterday, I wasn't really focusing on Israel. I was just, what I'm just trying to ask the question, always asking a question, if I'd been focusing on Israel, if I'd been an Israeli astrologer, would I have been picked all of this up? And I suspect I would have done. Not just me, but anyone. And I'm sure Israeli astrologers who had been looking at what was going on with their country's chart have probably been writing about this stuff for months, years, whatever. It's pretty basic stuff. So I don't think it's particularly controversial, and I'm sure, as I say, what I'm saying is pretty well known. And another thing about Israel's chart is that Israel's there's Mars Saturn. So the Mars Saturn midpoint, Israel's Mars Saturn midpoint is about 12.6. It's about 24 Leo. So that sun, the sun of Palestine, is on Israel's Mars Saturn midpoint, and the sun of Israel. Israel has got its own sun on its own Mars Saturn midpoint. So the association with death is like all over the place. And one final point about the Palestine chart. If we look at Palestine's chart, and Mars and Saturn, okay, so so there is you see at the Palestine, Palestine, Mars. See, Palestine has got a Mars Saturn square. So Mars is at 1 Aries, Saturn is at 0 Capricorn. So, and it's pretty close to the Aries point. So Palestine does have this Mars Saturn square just baked into the chart. And so death is going to be very, very much part of the Palestinian experience. I'm not convinced that this is. I'm not convinced that this Palestine chart is particularly great. They should have thought about that before making their announcement in Algiers. So overall, those are a few extra charts I wanted to look at, and I don't think this whole thing is going to bode well for Palestine. Yesterday I looked at the chart of the attack. I didn't think this was a good time to be making the attack, and I think that it will probably backfire on them, and the history books will realise that they made a mistake. I think that's my view. I don't think it was a good time to launch that kind of thing. Anyway, that's all I'm going to say for today. Thank you for listening. And I will talk to you again tomorrow.